Hello, everyone, and welcome to our very second show of Cubicle Lift, a podcast, Zoomcast, some kind of cast where we talk to experts in mental health and wellness, suicide prevention, and in the business world about workplace mental health. We are short on taglines, but long on expertise, so we're still figuring that out. Second show, we no longer have the excuse, this is our first day, so we're going to get it right. We're going to keep it tight. And my name is Josh Rivedal. My co-host is Efrem Epstein. We will introduce you to our guests in just a moment, these two amazing, lovely, wonderful people. Josh Rivedal, I'm Possible Project. Efrem Epstein is a dear friend who I've known for about 8.5 years. I am a survivor of suicide loss. My father and my grandfather. I have worked in suicide prevention and mental health for a little over 9 years. And educate, engage, entertain on mental health, suicide prevention, workplace, and in largely universities, curriculum, books, etc. Don't need to hear all about that. Important thing is I'm interested, I'm engaged, and I want to have big conversations and make meaningful change around these topics. I'm going to kick it over to my lovely co-host, Efrem Epstein.
It's not every day I get called lovely. I've been called a lot of things, some better than others, but lovely is a first, and I'm liking it. So if you're watching here, feel free to call me lovely. Feel free to call me lovely next time you see me. I don't know how to build on that. I will just add to what Josh said. He said about 8.5 years. November 14th, 2011 is, I believe, the first day that we ever officially met. I think I had seen you. You did not see me a few weeks beforehand at a local AFSP event. But we met when we were on a panel together, I believe, Monday night, November 14th, 2011. So we're coming up on our 9-year friend-iversary, ally-iversary, whatever we call it. I double what Josh said. I'm very, very excited about this show. We have two amazing guests, Jonathan, Deeatra. I'll let them introduce themselves. Deeatra, I just met, seems like an amazing person. And Jonathan, I've known a little bit longer, so I will say his credentials, which you'll hear about, are very impressive. But let me just tell you that more important than those credentials, he is seriously one of the nicest and most caring people you'll ever meet, which to me is more impressive than all his other credentials, which are impressive in themselves. Deeatra, so a pleasure to have you here. Can you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Yes, thank you, Ed. Thanks for having me, both to you and Josh, and hello, Jonathan, and all of our viewers, our listeners. My name's Deeatra K. For those of you who are really tripping up on that name, you can call me D. It's for short, like the fourth letter in the alphabet. I'm a suicide ideation and attempt survivor. I've lost a couple of friends to suicide. I have watched loved ones struggle with thoughts and survival of suicide attempt. And I guess my focus here within the realm of mental wellness and how to live mentally well is to give people a sense of purpose, a reason to live, in that when it comes to the topic of suicide, that we open the door to them understanding not only what is bringing that level of psychological pain to the surface, but also empowering them toward their own wellness by building stronger networks and by using what we can help them discover in their own journey of exploring the different risk factors and behaviors that they've been impacted by, utilize that information to connect them with a plethora of resources in their local and national communities that can be a part of this network of connection that helps breed healing. And so I'm so excited to be here. I've developed a couple of programs that resulted in 0 suicide losses over the course of 4 years and about 150 people participating, ages 9 to I think mid-60s. I'm hoping to find an academic scholar that would love to bring those programs in-house for an academic study and be able to prove evidentially that those programs are sound, that they work. Outside of the nonprofit environment that I had started, we've since closed, but those programs are still available, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be really looking to change the landscape of suicide prevention and what mental wellness looks like by introducing new innovative programming. So that's kind of my standpoint. I'm sure we'll get to other things. Jonathan, I am so looking forward to meeting you beyond just this today. I hear such good things about the two of you. I really do. Josh has I think he's done you proud in sharing his passion and love for both of you. So
that's why we pay him the big bucks.
Right. Josh is like family. He's my family.
Josh, I think you got a new tagline for yourself. Josh, he's like family.
He's like family.
I like it. It'll be the same music in the background as those Olive Garden commercials.
I do. I love him, and
salad. Why? Thank you.
He'll be coming to town soon, so we'll be doing the house guest, I guess, kind of like brother, sister, cousins kind of thing here soon again.
Yep, I can't wait. Yeah, I'll be staying with you and Chris. You guys are family for sure. When I moved to Philly back in June 2020, I stayed with you guys for a couple days on my way out. I drove all the way from Los Angeles to Philly, and you guys were a major stop. So. And one thing that you're missing, I want to tell everyone, and then I'll kick it to Jonathan. Deeatra is also an experienced and very successful marketing professional and business person extraordinaire. So that she's also bringing that element of expertise, knowledge base.
Thank you.
For sure.
And yeah, that's my background. Really, is where I started, was business excellence in marketing, sales, and operational performance. So yeah, love working with the corporate world and helping them understand how mental wellness can incorporate into their culture to build stronger return on investment and employee retention.
Deeatra, thank you. Jonathan Singer, I'm gonna let you fill us in on who you are, and you're now one of the nicest people I've ever met, according to F. But you are an incredible guy. A chance to serve on a couple boards with. So
yeah, thanks. Real pleasure to be here, Deeatra. It's a pleasure to meet you. And I'm the current president of the American Association of Suicidology. I'm an associate professor of social work at Loyola University, co-author of Suicide in Schools, a practitioner's guide. I'm also on the board of HUSITA, which is an international organization dedicated to the intersections of human services and technology. I'm also the co-lead of the Social Work Grand Challenge, Harness Technology for Social Good. I was first introduced to suicide and the idea of suicide in schools about 34 years ago. I was in the high school production of Ordinary People at T.C. Williams in Alexandria. And then several years later, I ended up getting an MSW, and my first job out, I was doing suicide risk assessments for kids out in the community. And that's what started my professional career. And I've focused on suicide as an area of expertise ever since. So it's a real honor and pleasure to be here talking about workplace issues, mental health, mental wellness, suicide prevention, and I'll probably jump through all of those different hats as we talk about it. Oh, and I have a podcast called the Social Work Podcast, which I started in 2007.
Sweet.
One of the best one of my favorite Twitter follows. So seriously, if you're not following them on Twitter, definitely it's a great follow. And just realizing something here, I think the four of us all have a connection to Philadelphia. Is that correct?
Philly, definitely.
Yeah, my only connection is that Josh is my family.
Mm-hmm. Is that a step? That's yeah.
You have to go west to find my roots.
Mm-hmm. Idaho. So
Idaho.
I wanna kick it off, and I'll just go for it. Why, Jonathan and Deeatra, and F, of course, and me, but why is mental health in the workplace important to discuss, particularly from the vantage point of suicide prevention? So like maybe even reframing it, why is suicide prevention in the workplace important to discuss, and why now?
Jonathan, you want to take it first?
Yeah, sure. So speaking of Philly, many years ago, I was I was interviewed on NPR about something having to do with a youth suicide thing that I was doing. And a muralist from the city of Philadelphia's mural arts department called me up and said, "Hey, we're going to be embarking on the first suicide prevention mural for the city of Philadelphia, and we think for the world. And I was wondering if I could talk to you." And his question was, "Where should we put the mural?" And my first response was, we should put it everywhere, because suicide affects everybody everywhere. Uh, and I said, we could pick any of these businesses that have these big, beautiful buildings in Philadelphia, and we could put the mural on the side of that building, and it would be 100% appropriate, just as appropriate as it would be to put it on a psychiatric wall of a hospital or a school or a methadone clinic. And, I think that when we think about risk for suicide, and we think about rates, CDC since 2017 has said that 45 to 60 are highest rates of suicide when we think of sort of the general population. And what I always talk about is that even if the adult themselves isn't suicidal, the folks that work in these places are oftentimes parents, and their kids could be suicidal. And what a horrible work environment to be in, where you come in and people are like, "Hey, Jonathan, how you doing?" And you're like, "I got to lie to you because my kid's in a suicidal crisis. But if I say that, you'll think that I'm a shitty person and a shitty parent." So I think workplace suicide prevention is not just about the workers. It's about who the workers are when they leave the office. And that's the parents. And the children of adults who are of sort of older adults who are suicidal. So I think that we have to focus on workplace, because it is one of those central locations where it all comes together.
Yeah, I can't agree more with you, Jonathan. Actually, I was thinking there are so many influences within the workplace, and I think you're bringing to light the friends, the family of those who are doing their 9 to 5 or third shift or whatever it is. It's nearly impossible to divide oneself into compartments when you're dealing with somebody who is in suicidal crisis, whether it's yourself or it's a loved one. It is it's just nearly impossible to deal with that at home and then shut that off, go into a work environment and be able to perform at your highest rate and carry on life as though everything is okay. And so I think that addressing the workforce really allows us to create this all-encompassing touch point. I often will speak on the 7 different segments of wellness, and occupational wellness is so important, and it's so tied to the other 6. When you look at, if I'm not happy with where I'm working, I'm probably not performing very well, which is going to bring my mental health down. If I'm not working well, it's probably going to infringe upon how I feel about myself spiritually. It may even lead me to losing my job, which now creates a financial burden. And there's all of these variables that we can see play out within the workplace. For employers, a lot of times it has to come down to the bottom line. Business doesn't happen unless you have profitability. And if you have a really well workforce, then you'll see that profitability go up. You'll see your retention levels of those top performers go up. You will see your profit line go up. And so, it's smart business. It is just smart business. My first real big turn in recognizing that my hidden truth, like you were talking, Jonathan, my hidden truth about where suicide had influenced me and my life, came 13 years after I survived a very serious attempt. And also after I had developed an 8-year-long friendship with an amazing business professional who I'd worked with closely, who I built far beyond just the work measure, a true friendship with. And trying to wrap my mind around how I lost this bigger than life individual. to suicide. How does that happen? Because he's the pillar, he is the example of what we strive for. How do we lose those individuals? And I think that it's a segment of our society, that middle-aged male who is questioning, why am I still where I'm at? I thought I would be forward from here, who is holding lips tight because men don't talk, and they certainly don't share feelings. You know, for the three of you here with me, I'm the only one allowed to have feelings. You guys got that, right? Society says so. And so breaking down some of that stigma in the workplace, I think, makes it more comfortable in our day-to-day lives, and necessary if we are ever going to change this landscape and provide true hope, healing, and a life of thriving beyond what suicide introduces to us.
Well, I'm going to pick up on that because I think that you brought up kind of the function of some companies, right? You have some companies that are sort of for profit. Obviously, you have the not for profit.
Absolutely.
But the bottom line is that in the United States, all companies need money to continue to do their job. And for some companies, there's more pressure to make money than for others. And I think that one of the biggest challenges that we have in the United States that I see is this, and this is how it fits in with suicide prevention, is that we have this assumption that if somebody's suicidal, it's because they are defective at an individual level. There's something wrong with them. And I think a lot of folks who are suicidal have internalized that. And I think that one of the biggest challenges with workplace suicide prevention is simultaneously addressing the need to identify individuals who might be at risk, while simultaneously acknowledging that suicide is a community level issue. It doesn't really make sense to have an organization say, we value you as an employee, and then for the employees to say, well, why don't you hire some more people so that we don't have to work overtime and instead we can have more family time. And for the workplace to come back and say, no, what I was thinking about is providing yoga at the workplace. That's what I was really thinking about, how we really value you is so that you can do some individual level work. And so I think this is a big challenge. I don't know that anybody has a solution to this, but I think if we're going to do legit suicide prevention in the workplace, one of the things that we have to do is we have to acknowledge that it's not an individual level issue, even though it is the individual that dies by suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great point. There's a book that's out. Go ahead. I'm sorry, F. Go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, and probably what you have to say is far more insightful than this. I was going to say that I think you both have hit on the idea that really mental health in the workplace and suicide prevention in the workplace is really almost two questions in one, two issues in one. Is it that the workplace has special triggers, or is it that the workplace has an environment where people are less likely to be open or are more concerned about being open? And I think the answer is yes and yes. I think that those are two separate issues, but they, if not equally, each play a huge factor into the larger issue of mental health in the workplace, suicide prevention in the workplace. The other thing also, I wanted to just pick up on what Deeatra said, because I think it comes back to this, the idea of people, maybe it can be by gender, but maybe it can also be by certain level, people who assume we're not supposed to have feelings. We've already referenced Philly a few times. Let's reference somebody that was in the news last week who also has a Philly connection because I believe he's a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania. The wonderful John Legend and his wife Chrissy Teigen were in the news, and because they sadly had a situation where they said we could use some public support, and a lot of people gave it to them, but they also got a lot of backlash from people saying, "Why are you talking about this publicly?" And I think if people, as revered as they are, as looked up to as they are, can get this backlash, well, I think people are looking around saying, how much more so do I need to be careful about what I talk about publicly? And My opinion on that is I think that they were 100% right and 100% within their right to say we could use some support. I think that people were 100% right to give it to them. And the fact that they got such a backlash really just shows how much work we still have to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me just take the baton for a minute, and then I want to, we'll keep playing air traffic controller and whoever's got the mic. But I think for me, what you just addressed about why are you bringing this up? Why are you talking about it? This idea of like it feels psychologically unsafe to talk about these taboo, if you can see my air quotes on camera, these taboo topics, like people have miscarriages, people have their period, people have addictions, people die by suicide, and yet these are still in certain circles taboo topics. And so for me, like what I see, and this is like a personal mission, but I see more and more people doing so, is showing this not a presentation in terms like it's an athlete, but like me showing up on the daily in weekly and monthly to the people, to my fellows, the people around me. And then when I present at universities or high schools or in a professional context, this is what somebody who's attempted suicide looks like. This is what somebody who has had mental health struggles. This is also somebody who is managing their mental health. This is why it's not okay to silo this person and to put them to the side and say, because hey, like, guess what, everybody, I pay my taxes, I have real estate, I have a little heart picture in the background, like things are kind of going okay for me. So I want people to see that picture. And the more we have people opening up and speaking up, it's like, this isn't a flawed individual. This is a person who needs help. And I think there's a really interesting thing you said where it's not just an individual, but it's a holistic societal issue. And I think that's one of the reasons why that we're not talking about this on a societal level, because then we have to address food insecurity. We have to address the changing workplace. We have to address tax code. We have to address housing. We have to address like how we speak and talk and do about all these different things. And it challenges our world of safety and security and the known versus the unknown. And so by having these conversations, I think it opens up this idea that it isn't just an individual thing. It is a layered, textured societal piece, and the workplace is part of that.
Yeah, and I do want to say, I want to say that, I was talking about the workplace as kind of a problem. I also want to say the workplace can be the solution, right? I think there are millions of people who have had the experience during the COVID pandemic when their offices were shut down. Assuming they still had a job, that's a slightly different angle, but assuming that their offices were shut down, of saying, wow, I miss my colleagues. I miss the camaraderie. I miss being able to go in and have that social interaction. I'm a parent. I've got 3 kids at home, love my kids, but I miss talking to adults other than my wife, in a workspace environment. Having what Clean Water Action used to call the positive work environment was a place where I could go in and it wouldn't matter what was happening before I got to work. When I got to work, I knew there was an expectation about how I was going to be professional, but also how people were going to be with me. And that was affirming. It said, you have value. You can contribute something. And knowing that I can contribute something, that I am important to a group of people that's important to me, and that I feel part of that group, it sort of takes care of 2 of the 3 categories in Joiner's interpersonal theory of suicide. So I just want to tip my hat to the workplace, that it absolutely can be suicide prevention.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, excellent point. Bringing up books because, excuse me, I have a great appreciation for Thomas Joiner's work. I have been reading a book, and I apologize, I was looking down while Josh was talking, but only because I think it's a worthwhile notion that I would bring up this book. Critical Suicidology, Transforming Suicide Research and Prevention for the 21st Century. Let's see, you guys see that there?
Oh yeah, great book.
Yeah, excellent book. If you haven't read it, you should. And Jonathan, you were bringing up a really good point about this being a social challenge that we're facing, not just an individual challenge. And this book really dives pretty deep into that, especially when we're looking at I'm just not going to be able to say the word, indigenous populations. Look, I did it. Get a like little gold star. And when we're looking at, school age children, I look at what we do within our school environments. That is their work environment. We send our kids to school, and that is their work. They're not getting paid a wage. They are getting paid in grades that allow them to promote to the next job, that prepare them for the next major shift, transformation in their life, which will be college or that first really big post-high school graduation position. And that is prevention, if we're smart about it, at its best, because now we're able to, as you had said, evaluate, assess what each of these individual youths may be exposed to, risk factors and behaviors, identify those that are at the greatest risk, and then provide them with programming that can help build those healthy coping skills, introduce them to resources, teach them how to communicate about their feelings and how to utilize everything that they have within their network to build a solid foundation that isn't just going to serve them today. It will serve them all of the tomorrows after today. I hope my grandmother heard that, because she used to say, I'm not just feeding you for today, I'm feeding you for all of the tomorrows after today. And it's the same concept. We're feeding the mind that feeds the body, that feeds the soul. All of it's interconnected. And we cannot expect that we're going to change the future without looking at those who hold our future. And so my big focus has always been get to our youth long before we think that they are going to be affected. My son, who everybody would identify as, he's just incredibly gifted. He's very smart. He presents well, does well. I was truly brokenhearted and shocked to learn that when he was in 5th grade, he's now 23 and getting his master's degree in engineering, but in 5th grade, he had a plan to end his life. And I had already been down that journey, put a plan into action, and I had no idea. Why is it that those who are affected, frontline affected, they're having these thoughts, have no idea how the thoughts started, where they're coming from, what to do with them, why they feel so confused they can't form sentences or express that pain? It's because we've never taught them. They understand how to, write the equation 1 + 1 = 2, although I guess today they're doing it very different than they did in my old days. But that doesn't matter if you cannot process the equation, let alone the answer, because your mind is in such suffering, because you don't even understand why it's begun to hurt. So these are lessons that we absolutely have to get out to the masses. We need to look at those middle-aged men that are working right now, questioning why they're not where they thought that they were going to be. And for men, and then some of us women, we identify a big part of our value within our career. And for young adults, many of them are identifying their value on a report card or on what somebody thinks of them, or whether or not they make it on a particular team or a particular school is looking at them. If we don't understand where that's coming from, and if we're not looking at all of the variables, you're right, Josh, you said that this is something where, I think it was you who said that we need to build out, it's so huge. But that's why schools should know exactly who they have in their community to address the major risk factors and behaviors that they can make referrals to. Mental health professionals should be working with peer professionals and the larger community to build networks of support that match up specifically to a particular person's risk factors and behaviors and the level of felt suffering that they have in line with each one of those line items. We're trying to treat a worldwide epidemic, if we want to talk about epidemics, by using the exact same solutions that we have been using for centuries. And then we wonder why it's not getting any better. And that's why I love the three of you gentlemen, because we need strong men that are out there saying, there's a better way. Let me introduce you to it and let's talk about it.
Let me squeeze in here because there was a lot of good. We got a lot of good points and mileage, but I think
I babbled.
No, you didn't actually. Not at all. Not at all.
No, you said a lot of great stuff.
Own your business. You did it. No, actually, what I want, because it's my job to play air traffic controller, is to shift, but shift it in the same place. So the question really is, because I was thinking about your son, and then I was thinking about the conversation, and now we're taking this particular conversation downstream into suicide prevention. So we were upstream, now we're moving downstream. How do we have that conversation with someone in the workplace? We could expand upon, because to me, these conversations transcend the location and the person. I mean, there's certain ways that we speak to people, et cetera, in this context, in that context, and whatever. But I think largely some of these, if not all of these conversations feel quite similar. So how do we intervene if we see a person in our vicinity, our professional peer, colleague? How do we have a conversation with them if we suspect, or if they come to us and tell us that they're experiencing suicide ideation? How do we have this conversation?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's really important in the outset, if we think about taking an upstream approach, is for folks to know that asking people if they're suicidal is not going to make them suicidal, right? So there is that education and awareness that has to happen, and this is something that we know empirically from youth and in the military and all sorts of research studies. I think another thing that's really important is for folks to know what their role is in the workplace. Like this is something that's different than being outside of the workplace. Yes, when you're hanging out with your friends, like if I'm talking on the phone with F and he's like, yeah, I'm kind of struggling, I might feel awkward because we're friends, and like, should I ask him about that? Is it going to turn like weird? But like, it's all in the mix. If F is my subordinate at work, if he is, on the next team over, that we have some connection, but it's mostly because of a project that used to happen but doesn't happen anymore. And he's like, yeah, I'm really struggling. Like, is it my job in the workplace to have that conversation? I don't know, right? So these are the kinds of things that need to be established in the workplace to say, yeah, this is your job. Or if you're concerned, here's somebody to refer to. And please know that making the referral is not going to ruin this person's career. And so these are three things. One, knowing that you're not going to make somebody suicidal by asking them the question. Number two, knowing what your role is. And number three, having some assurances in the workplace that by making the referral, by actually saying, hey, this person needs help, that they're not going to be penalized.
Mm-hmm. Excellent point. I think there's a lot of fear out there on what do I say? And if I do say something, how might that end up affecting me in a negative way? How might that affect my peer? I truly believe that companies incorporate wellness into their company culture. And so the ideal is that, each company would embrace the idea of wellness serving them well as an organization, and that these would be conversations that simply are a part of the onboarding experience, are part of the routine assessment of an employee's performance, and that it not even be something that is unusual. That even those who don't normally feel comfortable having these conversations understand that it's just a part of the culture to make sure that we all are able to enjoy the experience of employment and life beyond the four walls of our employer. So I think that is ultimately what we should be striving for as a culture and societally. However, that's not likely to happen anytime soon. And so then I think that it comes down to the individual who's watching or listening to this podcast, the individual who has been affected, who wants to know, what can I do to inspire change? And that means going to the HR director. And if you don't have a specific HR director, then who hired you? or the owner of the company for a very small company and asking, where does wellness fit within our culture? Do we have any type of a strategy on how to help somebody who might be in crisis, or help them if they've got a loved one who's in crisis? And that can go beyond just suicide. That's a lot of those risk factors or certain behaviors that can also disrupt the day-to-day life within the work environment. You know, if we look at suicide and then we look at other major challenges within our society, such as drug use or sexual promiscuity and things that can come out of that, and all of these things that we look at and go, oh my goodness, shh, shh, water cooler, quiet talk. What we'll recognize if we look at them across the line is that a lot of the risk factors and behaviors that led to those certain behaviors that led to that accelerated behavior all eventually can lead to suicide. And so making all of that open for discussion without penalty, without judgment, simply by getting more curious. Curiosity allows us to gather data, and data allows us to make logical decisions. And when we look at it in that frame, then it allows us, when we stay very mindful, to be logical in our data gathering and our analysis of that data. It allows us to take a step back and leave that emotion, that personal opinion, on the sideline where it belongs. Because a lot of times when it comes to somebody who's dealing with these challenges, logic doesn't fit into the picture. And if they would say it's a perfectly logical decision to do these things, it is from a very distorted perspective. And so we need to be able to hold that tide in a time when we ourselves are in a calm state of mind to say, what is our policy? What is our process? And if we don't have one, might I be a part of creating some type of steering committee to develop one and have that be part of the hiring culture, part of the day-to-day culture? There's a company here in Milwaukee, or in Wisconsin, out in Sun Prairie. It's called Culver's. For those of you who aren't familiar with Culver's, it's a fast food restaurant, by the way. Absolute best frozen custard and butter burgers anywhere. Yes, Josh is with me. And so, yeah, I've got some good friends there and they keep me well supplied. They have different experiences within their corporate environment where there's a table. One time I was out there to see them, there's a table and it's got all of these little slips of paper, and they're asking people to put positive thoughts on how they are influencing others within the workplace. What are they giving that's above and beyond? What are they doing for somebody else? What do they really appreciate that somebody else did for them? And they're just writing those thoughts, fold it up, stick it into a box, right? And then those things get shared, not necessarily with a person's name, but just that positive culture. And it's specifically for developing a sense of wellness, a sense of community. Those things don't cost anything, but they can literally be invaluable. So coming up with those ideas and sharing them with the key leaders of those organizations that we represent. And, you know, for every $1 that we invest into somebody's wellness, for every $1, we save $2 in preventative care.
Amen.
I mean, it's just, again, it is smart business, and it's good for people's souls, even when they don't think there's any place for personal affect to be in the workplace. There is, we cannot divide it.
Thank you.
No, it's good. I was going to say, yeah, fantastic. I agree with so much of that. And yeah, that $1, we save $2 for every $1 we put in is such an important, impressive statistic that we got to hammer home over and over again.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to add on to what both of you said is really a word that I'd heard for the first time a few months ago, and I've now heard it a few more times since, which I think is a word that I'm really hoping we hear a lot more in the rest of 2020 and into 2021, is neurodiversity. We talk about all the ways that diversity has benefited the workplace. Neurodiversity, along with other forms of diversity, is very, very important. The idea that we're starting to see workplaces, we still got a long way to go, say, you know what, we realize that some people don't interview as well as others, but they may be the people that actually do the better job and are going to help our bottom line more. And so we're going to, because we want to be sensitive, but also because we care about our bottom line. And so therefore, we're not going to assume that every person, well, first off, we're not going to assume every person is the same, but we're not going to assume that every person needs to fit into this box of looking a certain way, handling themselves a certain way that we've come up with a few decades ago that was an ideal, or at interviews a certain way. We're going to look other ways there to try to identify who are the key people that can really help our company. And just like with other forms of diversity, you want to be sensitive to this ethnic group or to this orientation or to this gender, this non-binary. The best way to accomplish all of that is to have representation. And the best way for a workplace, even if they have the best of intentions, to say we're going to be sensitive to neurodiversity and sensitive to people who are struggling, is not be afraid to say, you know what, I'm hiring this executive who is very open that they struggle with anxiety. I'm not going to shy away from promoting this person to a CEO who is very open. And people don't have to be open. This person happens to be open to the fact that they called the suicide hotline when they were in college. And I brought this up very quickly in episode 1. I'm just going to bring it up very quickly now because I don't want this to be about politics. And it doesn't matter whether you agree with him on any other issue. It doesn't matter whether you vote for him or not. But it is not insignificant that we have somebody running for president, former Senator Joe Biden, who is very open about the fact, saying that he had suicidal thoughts once upon a time. That is something that I don't think we could have had somebody from major ticket running who is very open about that in their past, even just a few years ago. We do now.
I agree.
I want to take a moment to distill from that question and then ask Jonathan and Deeatra to leave us with a brief-ish final thought, and then we will close it down. Every time I hear episode 1, I think of Star Wars, but no, episode 1 of Cubicle. So how to talk to somebody. And then Jonathan, you gave us some framework. Deeatra, you gave us some upstream. You kind of wove in and out. How to talk to somebody, just briefly, quickly. If you know somebody who's in crisis, whether you're in the workplace or not, just because you're not struggling and somebody else is, doesn't mean you have to have all the answers, B, know it all, or C, even pretend or think that you need to look that way. You don't have all the answers for somebody else, whether they're in crisis or not. So we can't fix anybody. I say this all the time: you can facilitate, you can't teach, right? So president, CEO, you need a cabinet, a board of directors, and that's our job. We can't go in and do the job of the person living their life, but we can be the best damn board of director or the best damn cabinet member possible. And so that means we can't jump in and say, hey, by the way, Madam or Mr. President, did you think about taking a lap, or did you think about your family today? Like, not helpful, disingenuous, and it presupposes that they even like their family or need to go for a run or whatever that is, right? So listen, no judgment, empathy over sympathy. So I feel you over I feel badly for you. Nobody really likes pity or sympathy. We're active listening for clues that might make them feel important, that they matter, that might help them feel grounded, so then they're more receptive and open to the level of help that they need. That could be psychiatric help, that could be psychological help, that could be peer support, depending on the level of acuity in their crisis, if crisis at all. So, you know, it's a bit like CPR in a sense, the way that we're framing this. And it's also probably good that we tell, if in the workplace, we tell a direct report above us or somebody in HR, not as a gossipy thing. We do it in private. Think about HIPAA, even though HIPAA doesn't necessarily apply here, but think about, we're not doing it to gossip, we're doing it to ensure our own safety and mitigate our own liability, which probably shouldn't even be an issue, but we're doing it that way. And also just to ensure that we have our own levels of support as well. So we have multi-tiered layers of support. The idea that it takes a village is so very true. So we need to engage in all different levels of support inside and outside the workplace, especially when we're supporting someone else. And we need to also engage in self-care and support for ourselves as well, because it takes a lot to help somebody who's in crisis, to engage on that on that emotional level. It's doable. It's not easy, but it's doable. And so that being said, I want to first ask Deeatra and then Jonathan as we close down, just to maybe leave our listeners, viewers with a takeaway, something that they can take away, some actionable step that they can do or take on in the workplace or beyond, in the realm of suicide prevention relevant to this conversation. Deeatra, do you want to?
Sure, thanks, Josh. So I'm going to hit on two things, but they're pretty quick. First of all, find out what the policy is within the workplace and be a contributor toward developing one or strengthening it with the resources that you're already aware of, so that the workplace is a safe, healthy environment for having open dialogue on these tough discussions. And as a part of that, you were talking about empathy versus sympathy. I'm a QPR instructor, and one of the things that I've incorporated into a lot of my speaking topics when I'm out in the community speaking is a video from Brené Brown, and it is specifically named Empathy versus Sympathy. And I see a lot of nodding heads because those of us who are within industry, we understand it. But for those who are coming to this podcast for the first time, look up Brené Brown, empathy versus sympathy. And the thing that I think that she does really, really well is that she explains that empathy being different than sympathy is when I sympathize, I am sympathizing for you, meaning you're here and I'm here, but we're separate. And there is no true connection, which is necessary, especially in the prevention of suicide and the development of wellness. Having empathy means that I feel with you, and it's not necessary that you have experienced suicidal thoughts yourself. What is necessary is that you understand what it's like to feel alone, to not feel like other people get you, to feel like you're a burden, that somehow the world around you has given you far more than what you can give back. If you can tap into that, then when you talk with somebody, when you approach somebody, you are coming from a point of authentic connection because you do get a part of that pain. And then it's not a matter of self-preservation or gossip. It's a matter of simply being there for somebody else because that's what we are designed to do. Human beings are designed, intrinsically, we are designed to be in connection with one another. And utilizing what we can learn from somebody like Brené Brown allows us to be able to make that connection. And the last thought is that QPR, question, persuade, refer, that style of approaching somebody, it works. It works every single day. It works, but it takes being introduced to it. It takes taking the class, and it takes practicing it outside of a real world experience. No different than if somebody had a heart attack and you were trained in CPR, you'd know how to be able to prevent them from dying. QPR does the same. There are other similar trainings that are out there. Do your research, get online, learn what you can do to be an advocate, not only for others, but maybe the life you end up saving ends up being your own.
Thank you, Deeatra. That was really quite poignant. Appreciate it. Thank you. Jonathan, final thoughts.
Yeah, so I'm going to pick up where Deeatra left off about the the courses. So QPR, you get trained online. There's mental health first aid. There are a bunch of other courses out there. And if your workplace is not providing them, then go out and do them. They're out there. They're not expensive if they cost anything at all. Number two, find out if there is a suicide prevention committee at your organization, if there is a mental wellness committee, if there's something that where employees are part of the decision making. This is not just located in HR. And if there isn't, then ask about starting something, saying this is really important. We want to know what is going to happen. Use workplace suicide prevention .com as a resource, and it's full of excellent information about workplace suicide. And so you're not going to be starting this from scratch. And then the last thing that I'll say is during this time of COVID and kind of racial uprising and acknowledgement of all these systemic inequities, is when you are taking care of yourself, be very clear on what part of yourself should actually be taken care of by the system, and don't ignore that. Make some noise, make some phone calls, scream at windmills, whatever you need to do to say, this is not me. This is the system that has screwed this shit up, and the system needs to fix it. Now I'm going to be part of the system, but and be part of the solution. But this is not just on me. Taking deep breaths, going for long walks on the beach. We need our systems to be intact and doing a much better job of managing the havoc that they have wreaked.
That's beautiful, Jonathan. Thank you. Efrem, what do you have to say, my friend?
Well, I really don't want to say so much because both of our guests have really said just about everything I wanted to say way better than I ever could have said it. So it's almost a sin that I'm speaking after them. But I just want to, from my own personal lived experience, I want to just reinforce everything that was said. I want to also say that sometimes you will get resistance. And when you do get resistance, you need to make a judgment call how far you want to push. But I want to say sometimes that resistance will come because people are doing some of their own projecting. So you need to make a judgment call, but just know that going in. If you're getting resistance, maybe you can find a way to sort of uncover what's under the hood. Where's that resistance coming from? And sometimes knowing that can help you navigate to where you want to go.
Beautiful. Thank you, Efrem. Thank you so much. Thank you to our guests. Thank you for our future viewers and listeners. This has really been an enlightening and big conversation. I have a new coping mechanism too, screaming at windmills. I'm going to start a band called Windmill Screamer. That's a nice side byproduct. But no, this is a big conversation, and there's more conversations to be had. So thank you, Jonathan Singer and Deeatra K, Deeatra Kaifas, for being here and for taking the time to have this conversation. Cubicle Lift, I'm Josh Rivedal. Co-host is Efrem Epstein. This is our second episode. We're going to have a third episode very soon with Sally Spencer-Thomas, Sarah Gare, and Frank King. He's hilarious. So we don't have a website yet, but when we do, we'll let you know. But we're going to keep this out on LinkedIn and Facebook and everywhere else pretty soon. Cubicle Lift, thank you so very much. And peace out, because we don't have a good tagline to leave. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, everyone.